Reading with your kids.
Hey, so great to see you. Come on in. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast, an iHeartRadio Best Kids and Family Podcast Award nominee. We're so delighted that you're joining us today. Thank you so much for being part of our mission to help families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Amazon Music, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you find your podcast. We have 3 amazing guests for you today. First, we'll be traveling to Ontario in Canada to speak to Holly Hatam. She is the illustrator of Maxine and the Greatest Garden Ever. Then we'll be traveling south to speak to Cheryl DaVeiga and Dave Gibson and their debut picture book, War at the Ice Cream Store. Before we invite Holly in, I want to invite you to check out my debut picture book. It's called The Great Maritini. It's all about this fantastic, aspiring, well, some would say clumsy magician named Sam, who called himself the Great Maritini. Now, your kids are going to love the fact that Sam makes all sorts of really goofy mistakes on stage. They're going to laugh out loud at that. You're going to love the fact that Sam never gives up on himself. And that grit helps him perform amazing transformations on stage. But it's during a journey from one stage to another with no crowds around to applaud that Sam discovers that the greatest transformation of all is transforming feelings of caring into action to help another human being. The only place you can find The Great Maritini at this time is on Amazon. It's available to read for free via Kindle Unlimited. Check it out today. The Great Maritini by Jedley. Joining us right now from Waterloo in Ontario in Canada, one of my favorite countries in the world. Our guest is the illustrator of Maxine and the Greatest Garden Ever. Please welcome to the show, Holly Hatam. Holly, welcome to the Reading with Your Kids podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm excited to have you on. You know, most of our guests are authors, but we absolutely do have had a number of fantastic illustrators on. And I think it's really appropriate because when you're talking about a picture book is that, you know, that storytelling device that depends not only on the words, but also on the illustrations. The illustrations are so important to a picture book.
Yes, and I feel like you don't want to be redundant with the illustrations either. You don't necessarily want to show exactly what the words say, but what I try to do is add humor or little details of that character's life just as a background for the kids or the reader to get to know that character a little more through the illustrations.
Yeah. You know, I parents oftentimes joke about, oh, you know, my kid wanted me to read this book for the 500th time, and I'm going to go crazy. My head's going to explode. But and there are stories that are absolutely beloved, and you know kids want to hear that story over and over again. But I think in the case of a picture book, one of the reasons they want their parents to read a book over and over again is because of the illustrations. Because with a beautifully illustrated picture book, you can look at the book 5, 6, 10, 15 times and see something different every time.
And that's what I try to do, and especially with my latest book, Maxine and the Greatest Garden Ever. There's lots of little details and inventions that the kids can spot and find throughout the book, or little puns throughout, adding humor that you have to go and search for. And the little fish Milton, you got to find him on every spread as well. So there's lots to look at for the parents while they're going crazy, reading the same words over and over again, which I have done with my child.
So tell us about the story of Maxine and the Greatest Garden Ever, please.
Well, this is the second book in the series. And in this book, Maxine has her friend Leo, and they want to build a grand garden, but they have different visions of what this garden is supposed to look like. And it causes a little riff. And this book is just about friendship and how you come together, and it's breaking stereotypes, seeing as how Maxine is more the inventor And Leo is more of the very crafty, and he loves things to look pretty. So that's what I loved about it, yeah.
Yeah. How do you express that story in illustrations? How did you come to kind of begin the project? That's what because I'm in no way an artist. I've never been accused of being an artist in any way. What's the first step? Do you envision the characters in your mind, or do you just take a pen or paper or a computer mouse and just start playing?
Well, it begins, I read the manuscript first, and as I'm reading, I'm getting visions of my head of what I feel the story will be. And I jot down my little notes in the margins of the manuscript. And then when I go back to sketch, I do character designs first, just because they're so important. It sets the tone of the story. And after the character designs, I start sketching out the entire book. And then once the sketches are approved by the publisher, I start to paint and add the layers and the textures and all of that.
That's interesting because there are so many different ways that you can create art. What's your favorite medium?
I work all digitally just because it's a lot easier doing books. I don't know how other illustrators do things by hand because they're superheroes when publishers ask for revisions, and sometimes they're extensive. I don't have to start all over if I were doing everything by hand. At least digitally, I can just delete a layer and that is it. So those artists that are still doing it by hand, I don't know how, but you guys are amazing.
You know, as you were saying that, I have this terrifying flashback of high school and writing that 500-600 word term paper that you had to type, and it had to be perfect, and there were no erasers and no scratch outs or anything like that. And you'd get to, word number 599, and you were just about finished, and then you made a mistake, and you had to go back and start the whole thing over again.
Oh no, that's stressing me out.
Did you always envision yourself as a children's book illustrator?
I did. I have books that I created from when I was 8 years old. I've always wanted to become a picture book artist or an animator or something to do with animation.
What was it about children's pictures books that so fascinated you at such a young age?
Well, my parents always said I was always drawing and reading, and to this day, I'm still a very big reader. It was just a way for me to escape and just leave this world, and I'm obsessed with magical realms, and it was just a way for me to use my imagination as a kid. And just books were such a big part of my life. Yeah. And I'm like, well, books and art equals a picture book. I'm like, that's the best job ever.
Hey, well, one of the illustrators that's been on the show in the past told us that her parents encouraged her creativity from the age of 5 because they let her draw on the walls of her bedroom. And they never, ever painted over it. They never scolded her. In fact, they just got her more paint and crayons and color pencils. How did your family encourage your creativity?
Mine were the same. I used to draw a bunch of pictures and tape them to my wall as if it was a gallery. And then I would charge my parents an admission of 25 cents to come in to my gallery and view my art. And they too also let me paint on my wall. And I also painted on the basement wall. So it wasn't just my own bedroom. They allowed me to go throughout the house.
I think we're detecting a trend here. If your kid loves art and you want to encourage that creativity, you got to give up the walls.
Yeah. I don't know if I can do it as a parent. Terrible.
Well, of course it helps if your kids have their own space and there's a basement. But, nowadays, apartments are getting so small. Families are crammed into these tiny little boxes. And so, I don't know if I'd want my kids to be painting the living room wall or the kitchen wall.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Yeah.
So tell me, when the first time you were commissioned or hired to do a children's picture book, what was that like? What was that feeling that this is my dream come true?
It felt surreal. It's still, after I've been doing this now for 6 years, it still feels surreal each time. And every time I even see my book in the bookstore, that feeling, it never gets old. It's the greatest feeling. It's like seeing my childhood dream come true with every book that I see.
Yeah. One of the things that we encourage families to do on the show, especially with young kids, is before you read a story, it's really fun to take a picture walk through a book, to maybe even go and cover up the text and just take a walk through the pictures and talk about what the kids might think the story's about based on the pictures. What do you think about that idea of taking a picture walk?
That's I feel like I do that on my own when I'm reading a picture book. I always stare at the drawings first before I read. But I've never thought to do that with my son. That's a really good idea.
Well, I think one of the things, and it wasn't my idea, so I can't take credit for it, but I'm hearing enough people say they haven't heard of it, so maybe I'll steal it. No, but it was just suggested just as another way to experience the book, but also as a way, it's a great way to start that dialogue with your kids, because when neither one of you know what the story's about, and you think, hey, what do you think this is about? There's no wrong answers. You can look at a picture and the parent can see one thing and the child can see another thing, and both could be right. And at that moment, both are right. And it's not a matter of going back and reading the text to find out who really was closest to what the text said. It was just that idea that we're sharing this and we trust each other to share this opinion. And I think it's incredibly empowering when an adult, when a parent, when the most important person in a child's life says, I want to know what you think. I care. I value what you think. I think that can be very empowering.
I agree. I think I'm going to do that with my son.
Awesome. Well, you have to report back and let us know how it turns out.
I will.
Is there any type of book or characters that you're looking forward to illustrating that you haven't had a chance to do yet?
I don't know. I feel like I've almost covered all of the bases. I love books that have diverse characters and a person of color as the main character, not as the sidekick back in the shadows, but the main character, the spotlight's on them. I've done a lot of those. That's my most important thing to me when illustrating a book. I'm obsessed with magic, and I've written my own series of board books that were about mythical creatures, so I've done that, and I've done books about kindness, and the last thing I had wanted to do was a humorous book, and I got to do that last year it's called Sam's First Word, where a little baby's first word and the parents want it to be a certain thing, but no one's paying attention to her and she's actually saying her first word. I don't want to spoil what it is, but it's a really funny book. So I feel very fortunate that I feel like I've ticked off all those boxes that I've wanted to do.
That's wonderful. I envy people who are able to create art. You said that you love magic. I'm able to do magic on stage, but I think it would be so magical to just start with a blank piece of paper and just create something and bring a world to life on that blank piece of paper. What's that feel like, that ability? I know myself when I'm on stage and I'm able to show my hands are empty, and then all of a sudden something appears out of nowhere and I hear the kids react. That's an amazing feeling. What's it like, taking that blank piece of paper or blank digital screen and bringing a world to life?
It feels like you're magical in a way. Like when you're in that flow state, it feels like you wonder where it's coming from. When I get into that state of mind, it's as if my hand has a mind of its own, and it's just amazing.
Do you have an exercise or technique that helps you get into that flow state, or do you have to just wait until it comes?
My art is inspired a lot by my own emotions of what I'm feeling that day, and music inspires me a lot. If I'm in a funk, I'll either listening to something inspiring, or I'll go out in nature for a walk, and it always sparks something. That's
really cool. That we've definitely talked a lot about bringing your kids out into nature. There's so much to see. Just looking at a tree and imagining all the creatures that call that tree home.
And I'm a tree hugger, and I've made my child a tree hugger, so I fully understand.
Holly, this is really exciting. We've been talking about Maxine and the Greatest Garden Ever, that was written by Ruth Spiro. And I know you've illustrated a number of books. Where can folks go to find out more about all the books that you've been a part of?
The best way I feel is Amazon. I do have my own page. If you just put my name into the search field in Amazon, all of my books should come up.
Awesome. Well, we've had a wonderful time speaking to the illustrator of Maxine and the Greatest Garden Ever, Holly Hatam. Hey, Holly, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks to the magic of technology, we will travel south from Ontario down to New Jersey and Tennessee to speak to Cheryl DaVeiga and Dave Gibson. Joining us right now from the city of Nashville in Tennessee, and also joining us from New Jersey. Please welcome to this show the authors of War at the Ice Cream Store, Dave Gibson and Cheryl DaVeiga. Cheryl, Dave, welcome. How are you guys?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us.
Cheryl is joining us from New Jersey. Dave is down in Nashville. And our guests today, they co-authored War at the Ice Cream Store, but they've been a songwriting team for a long time. And so I want to talk about the book, about songwriting, and Cheryl has a lot of different things. Why don't we just start? Cheryl, can you tell us what we're going to experience when we read War at the Ice Cream Store?
Well, I'll read you the back cover because I think that sums it up. It says, if you like ice cream, you're going to love this story about how Mustachio Pistachio and his favorite friends teach Bully Vanilli a lesson in kindness and acceptance.
Bully Vanilli. Dave, was the name Bully Vanilli inspired by a legendary group of imposters, of singing imposters?
Yes.
A little bit.
It just seemed it just rhymed.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Of course, I'm referring to Milli Vanilli. Those of us who are of a certain age remember that group that was a monster group until we found out that they couldn't actually sing.
Right. It's all manufactured.
So I'm really interested. How did the team of Cheryl DaVeiga and Dave Gibson come together?
Well, I met Cheryl about 5 years ago through a friend of mine up there that she had and him had written a lot of songs together. His name is Anthony. I can't think of his name. Anthony Kryzan.
A good friend of theirs.
He was in this. He's such a good friend. I can't remember his name. He was in the Spin Doctors, and Cheryl and Anthony had written a lot of things together and won an award, actually. And so she came down here. He told me that Cheryl was coming to Nashville, and that I should meet her, and we did, and we just hit it off. We were just like sort of on the same page as far as our humor and everything, you know.
Yeah. And
that's kind of how we met.
And Cheryl, I understand you kind of discovered that you're on the same page through sharing a couple of songs that you had written.
That's right. So Dave had written this very funny song called The Frog Song. And the chorus is about how I used to be a prince and now I'm just a frog. And he plays it out actually all the time. And it's one of his most requested songs, even though Dave's written like 6 #1 hits in Nashville. He gets requests for the Frog Song. When I met him, I was recording and writing under the name Katie Grace, this animated character. And I had written a song called The Ice Cream Storm. And it was a funny little play on words, which is actually similar to our book. And we really clicked in the way we love to play with words. And we said, you know what? We just really have to find a way to work together. And for 5 years, I actually got a place out in Nashville, and we've been working on writing music and shows and all kinds of things together. And this is our first attempt at a book.
So how was that, Dave? How did you enjoy the experience transitioning from writing songs to writing a children's picture book?
You know, Cheryl and I kind of talked about how this all happened, and there was no planning. There was no I don't know what it was. One day when we were sitting in our office, we had an office downtown here in Ashland City, and it was just, we just sat around and we made up stuff. We had a whole puppet show, which is called the Waterhole Bunch, and Frank T.L. Frog he's the main character that started all that. That's a whole nother thing. And we had all these other puppets, but we got to a point where one day we was sitting around, and she started talking about the ice cream storm, and I said, or I don't think you even did, Cheryl. I said something, let's write a song about ice cream, and then all of a sudden we started going back and forth and talking about the characters maybe, and Bully Vanilli. Oh, that's cool. Oh, there's another one.
We didn't set out to write a story about bullying either. It was just that when we decided we were going to write something about ice cream, we came up with, we're talking about vanilla and songwriters that we are. We were sort of like, oh, Vanelli, Bully Vanilli, and Milli Vanilli, and all of those things. And we went, oh, okay, so he's a bully. Obviously, he's a bully. And then I Googled, what is the least popular ice cream flavor? And it turned out to be pistachio. And so then we started saying, so Bully Vanilli versus pistachio. And then we started laughing, saying, oh, he's been in the case so long, he has a freezer burn mustache. Yeah. And then it became pistachio versus Bully Vanilli. And then the book wrote itself.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's so cool. So cool. I don't think, as you're talking about the songwriting process, I think some people might be surprised because I know for a long time myself, I always had this image that, songs just kind of sprung out of your head and, you just kind of, inspiration hits you and it's just luck that sometimes inspiration decides to hit on the same person over and over again. But the reality, and sometimes that happens, but the reality is that songwriting, like writing a book, it's a discipline. It's sitting down and starting with a blank piece of paper or a blank piece of sheet music and going at it. Am I right about that?
Absolutely. I one day I'm going to write a book. I haven't done it yet, but a book about songwriting. Mm-hmm. And the title is going to be "The Rule Is There Ain't No Rules." It's like I've written hit songs from the top to the bottom, like Stream of Consciousness. That's basically kind of what this book was. We just let, one thing led to another. And it's like, oh, well, let's try that. And Cheryl and I both love play on words. We're punksters, to a fault sometimes. It's like, God, come on, please.
The editor takes some of them out at the end. All right, guys, enough. Right. You're right, Jed, in terms of the inspiration sometimes comes that way, as I was explaining, but the actual act of getting the book written and edited was a tremendous amount of discipline and rereading and rewriting and rereading and rewriting. So while at the end, just like a song, I think sometimes it sounds so simple and you're like, oh, that was so simple. But the process was not necessarily simple getting to it.
Yeah.
Cheryl, one of the things and again, I don't think people realize it, is that songwriting is storytelling. At least to me, good songwriting is storytelling. And
especially country music.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about, songs as stories and how it's not the same as writing a story. There's different structure to it. But can you kind of compare and contrast writing a story, writing a picture book, and writing a song?
Well, I can, and Dave will absolutely be able to chime in here because he's the all-time songwriter. But it is so similar that that's how we got to writing a book, saying, you know what, this is just like writing a story song. And as Katie Grace, my little animated character that sang, I used to call it Katie's story songs. And each of them kind of told a story. But in songwriting, there's a rhythm and a meter and a rhyme that you have to do. So it's like more than telling a story. Now you have to take your story and make it rhyme, make it roll off the tongue, make it sound good. Dave's frog song is the perfect story writing song. I mean, he meets it's a frog and a salamander meet in a bar. They get together, they fall in love, and then she runs off with a horny toad, and he breaks his heart, and then, and things happen in the song, and I think that's why people request it and love hearing it.
So, did you obviously you have the writing bug. You've been writing together for many, many years, writing some great songs. The experience of writing War at the Ice Cream Store, has this inspired you to think about writing more children's books in the future?
Funny you should say that. We already have another one we're sending. Well, we just sent it to the editor, and it's totally off the wall. It's based around one of our newest puppets. Actually, it's Anthony Crizon, who's the spin doctor guy, friend of Cheryl's. It's kind of it's called Rocket Red Ant and the Big Black Shoe. So, I mean, you can think in your mind, oh my God.
It's really about an ant that is a guitar hero, which is normal, right?
Yeah.
That's what you'd expect for our next book.
Yeah. Well, I'm really excited. I think that families will have a great fun time reading War at the Ice Cream Store, and then having those really meaningful, powerful conversations that can be life-changing, I think, around this issue. And I also know folks are going to, we've alluded, Dave, to some of your hit songs and Cheryl to some of your hit songs. I know that people are sitting down going, oh, I want to find out what songs they wrote. So where can people go to find out more about your music?
Well, I have a Facebook page, Dave Gibson, and I have actually a musician band page also. But I don't really have a website that you can go to, but you can find my music on Apple. You can buy it off that, or you can you can stream it on the Spotify and Pandora. And I'm just I don't know. My career has been it's gone from being an artist and a songwriter to book writing. So it's almost like this is my passion now, and I still write songs. Don't get me wrong. I wrote a song yesterday, but I guess I'm not really like, well, go to my website and buy my book. I buy my.
I will. I'll do it.
I want them to buy the book.
I'll do it, Dave.
Yeah.
You need to go to Frank TL Frog. Frank TL Frog with 2 G's and friends.com. There you will not only find our book, but there's a song, the War at the Ice Cream Store song, and there's a puppet narration musical that you can buy there. You can get a membership and you get in. There are free flip books with meeting the puppets. There are other sing-along songs for kids there. And the puppet narrated version is so much fun. It's Dave doing all of the voices, and I do some of the female voices. And it's video, it's multimedia, and then there's a sing-along War at the Ice Cream song, at the War at the Ice Cream Store song at the end that Dave sings. And please join us at franktl.frogandfriends.com.
Yeah, just like what I said. Cheryl knows. She's like, okay, I'm focusing on that. Dave's going off.
Quiet, Dave.
I've always been that, that's our relationship.
Well, it's obviously a relationship that's worked, and it's brought a lot of joy to people listening, a lot of joy now to families reading together. We've had a great time speaking to the authors of War at the Ice Cream Store, Cheryl DaVeiga and Dave Gibson. Hey, Cheryl, Dave, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having us. We're delighted to be here.
This is fantastic.
We love what you do, Jed. I've listened to a bunch of your podcasts. They're fabulous.
Please be sure to join us for the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Crispin Boyer. He is the author of the brand new nonfiction work from Nat Geo Kids. It's called Top Secret. That's the next episode of the show. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, I want to thank our guests, Holly Hatam, Cheryl DaVeiga, Dave Gibson. I also want to thank my team, Alejandro Doherty, Fatima Khan, Justina Thompson, Karen Fraser. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. We'll all be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.